Hola, hola, mi gente. ¿Cómo estamos? I know this is right after lunch, and instead of a nice nap, you get me, so I'm trying to inject a little energy. But it's an honor to be here with you as a proud advisory board member of the program. I'm truly fascinated by the speakers, the content, and the direly needed dialogue that is being sparked here today. You know, digital transformation is underway in virtually every facet of business, politics, policy, but unfortunately, as I'm sure you guys would agree, the demand has not been met by the supply in the labor market, and that's a real problem, and we're at a breaking point. This critical skills gap threatens really our economy more broadly, but also with nearly 10 million jobs going unfulfilled, we must do something about it collectively. We've got this sense of urgency now, collectively, to train the leaders of tomorrow. And with that in mind, I'm so encouraged that a group of talented individuals came together to launch the Aspen Latino Digital Success Task Force, a unique brain trust of cross-sector leaders advancing digital equity and for underserved communities. The mission is clear. We must ensure that groups such as our Latino cohort are equipped not only to survive in this environment, but to thrive in a future state where digital is integrated into every facet of society. Frankly, with that in mind, there's no better combination of luminaries to dissect these problems than our panelists today. They're going to dissect them, but hopefully come up with some creative solutions for you as well. Today's panel will be moderated by National Skills Coalition Senior Fellow Amanda Bergson-Shilcock. Amanda leads the organization's work on adult education and workforce policies to expand opportunity for US-born and immigrant adults. She's also a member of our Latino Digital Success Task Force. But before that kicks off, it's my great pleasure to introduce, to say a few remarks, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information. April McLean Delaney focuses on expanding access to affordable high-speed internet to all Americans, spectrum management, privacy, internet governance, and public safety communications, so not too much on her plate. Previously, she served for 15 years as the Washington Director of Common Sense Media, bridging the literacy and digital divide for our nation's children. So I hope all of you will join me in welcoming Deputy Assistant Director McLean Delaney.
Thank you. And thank you. I mean, what a great group, and I was so happy to meet so many of you as I came in today. So I'd like to start by thanking Dominica, Mike, the board of the Aspen Institute of Latinos in Society program, the Digital Inclusion Task Force, and today's panelists for making this critical conversation possible. So I'm speaking here today as the Deputy Secretary of Communications and also the Deputy Administrator of NTIA. And that stands for the National Telecommunications Information Administration, quite a mouthful. You know, for us, a key agency priority is the issue of digital equity. And we can no longer tolerate, as you know, the digital gaps in our country, especially in our most underserved communities. I commend this task force and this summit. I love economic resilience in Latino communities. It's incredible, but it's to better support Latino workers, small businesses, and communities in our increasingly 24/7 broadband world. So in preparing for this event, I kind of reviewed the May 18th launch of the task force. And I think Gadi Vasquez said it perfectly, and it really kind of summarizes a lot what I think at NTIA we're looking at. The world is changing in profound and irrevocable ways, which present both challenges but also significant opportunities. And the aim is to galvanize the talent, skill set, and networks of truly impactful leaders and all the service of addressing Latino success in the new digital economy. That aim is exactly what we are trying to do through the Biden administration and our focus on connecting all of America to reliable, affordable, high-speed internet. And through our Digital Equities Act grants to provide technical training and digital literacy skills and opportunities to communities who have not had that access before. Now, I read about the results of your nationwide survey that was completed in January of 22, and it illuminated how employers and workforce organizations need these digital skills and workforce trainings specifically targeted to businesses and Latino communities. The key tenets included, new ways of doing business, upskilling for new industries, and accessing education and healthcare services. We believe that these types of goals entail what we call a whole of government, But it also is really key to have coordination and a collective efforts of a diverse set of stakeholders. And that's why these roundtables are so very, very important. I'm also happy to see today Priscilla of the FCC that will be coming out on our panel. At NTIA, we work closely with the FCC and with the other stakeholders who are in the room from associations and businesses alike. But NTIA serves as the primary advisor to the White House on telecommunications and policy issues, and we're also the interagency coordinator of critical telecom and internet issues and in the area of spectrum management. The FCC and NTIA have worked closely this year on issues of spectrum policy, as we've looked at a national strategy on spectrum, but more importantly and of relevance here, we have supported their efforts related to broadband mapping, a critical step in determining underserved and unserved communities of Latinos throughout America. And we also often highlight the issue of affordability, because access to connectivity without affordability is nothing. I know the FCC has long worked on issues of affordability through E-rate and ACP, but these efforts of affordability are also key to our own agency at NTIA. So just a few points for those of you who don't know about NTIA and the Biden administration's efforts to tackle digital equity and how we are very focused on Latino digital success. So let me just recap briefly our programs for those of you who are not familiar with them, and maybe give a few programmatic updates. The administration is making good on Biden's promise to help close the digital divide once and for all. Our key program is NTIA's Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, or BEAD program. We're providing $42.5 billion of that money to states and territories to connect everyone in the nation to this, as we say, affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And we're starting with unserved communities. Already, all 50 states and 6 eligible territories opted in to the broadband program, and NTIA has already begun to issue planning grants for states and territories to develop their BEAD action plans. Next, NTIA's Digital Equity Acts grant program, which many of you are very involved with here, are providing nearly $3 billion for devices, technical training, digital literacy skills, and other resources for populations which historically have been left out of such efforts, including communities of color, seniors, veterans, and low-income communities. And also of particular significance is our Connecting Minorities Communities pilot program, which I'll discuss in a moment, which provides more than $250 million to colleges serving predominantly Black, Hispanic, and Native American populations. And that includes the purchase of broadband connectivity, but also equipment, and to hire and train information technology personnel. So as related to Latino youth and connectivity, I have a few points. The pandemic has taught us that access to high-speed internet is no longer a luxury, but an essential utility. Some equate it to almost electricity or running water. It is also key to U.S. competitiveness, workforce development, and getting Americans back to work. And what we've seen happens when people can't connect, it's terrible. It's hard to finish homework or to start a new business, and it gets harder for everyone. And one more thing, workforce development starts early, actually very early. Tomorrow's workers are today's elementary kids. Children who don't have affordable, reliable, high-speed internet service at home can fall behind in school. I know this because for 15 years, I worked at a nonprofit focused on digital literacy efforts for children, and too well know what the homework gap does. It has a real impact. Studies reveal that children who fall behind in school often have lower levels of educational attainment, lower incomes, and higher rates of incarceration than those who exceed academically. And while this administration is making progress, there's much more work to do. Nearly a quarter of Latino children, as many of you know, live in households without high-speed connectivity, and almost 20% of teenagers in this community don't have access to a home computer at all. We cannot allow this gap to be unfilled, and Hispanic Serving Institutions, or HSIs for short, are a critical part of that equation when it comes to filling it. HSIs equate for over 3.5 million students in 559 schools in 29 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. And 38% of these students are Pell Grant recipients. Higher ed education institutions have also proven to be well-suited for developing digital skills programs and workforce development programs in these communities. To do so, they need a lot of connectivity and resources. So last, I'm going to say that the President's Internet for All initiatives also includes something that's really important called the Connecting Minorities Communities, or CMC pilot program. As I mentioned above, the CMC pilot program provides $268 million in grant funding to colleges serving predominantly students of color. Because this administration recognizes that Hispanic serving institutions, HBCUs, or community colleges are not just places of higher learning, they're also vital community centers. They fuel job creation. They fuel entrepreneurship, which is something that is very dear and near to your hearts, and they help economic growth. So I'd like to highlight one of the institutions that has already received CMC funding most recently this year. That's Mercy College of New York. Mercy is the largest private Hispanic serving institution in the Northeast. 44% of its 7,080 undergraduates are Hispanic, and more than 500 received bachelor's degrees last year, the fourth highest number among private HSIs in the continental US. Their connected, credentialed, and ready project to expand student access to technology and build digital literacy skills has helped prepare these students for a world of increasingly remote work. This July, the Biden-Harris administration awarded them $2.6 million to help them implement this project, which will ultimately give these students the devices and connectivity they need to succeed. We are going to continue to work with stakeholders like you all and with throughout the country to identify and support initiatives like this in the coming year to fund and support. And some of my last points is the link between education and being prepared in the workforce cannot be underestimated. Good schools mean good jobs. A highly skilled, nimble workforce that can adapt to next generation technology will ensure that our businesses grow and thrive. And that is how the younger generation will not get left behind, but they will get ahead. Young Latinos who feel at ease with technology and provided the resources to access the digital economy will look to entrepreneurship as an opportunity. That means more Latino founders, it means more Latino investors, it means more equitable and inclusive capital flows, and most of it all, it means an economy built from the bottom up and the middle out, but not just from the top down. So my long introduction is really an introduction of NTIA and what we want to do and what we do each day, and how our commitment is so important to this country in terms of facilitating digital equity. It signals our deep support of task force efforts like this, and it's our invitation to meet with and highlight to use our local state FPOs regarding your challenges and opportunities. In the end, it is incumbent on us at the agency to listen carefully to Latino leaders and communities, to understand what success looks like, and to provide the resources that each community needs. Because depending on the state, depending on the stakeholders, those resources and the education and upskill forces are different. That's why I'm so proud to be a part of the Biden administration and to help implement this vision of American connectivity here at NTIA, and why I'm so excited to be here and to hear the digital success contributions that are being discussed. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to the task force. But Mark Colon is here from NTIA and will remain for the rest of the day. And I hope that we all stay in touch, but know our deep commitment to what you are doing here and how we want to support it. Many thanks.
Well, thank you, Deputy Assistant Secretary. It's a real pleasure to have NTIA represented here. I'm Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, and I'm going to ask the rest of our panelists to join us on stage right now. I'll be doing an introduction of them in just a moment, but they're going to come and seat themselves. We're about to talk about Latino digital success, and that's a big, heady term, so I want to ground us in the people for just a moment. This morning we had extraordinary fresh fruit for breakfast. People picked that fruit, farm workers, many of them Latino, right? But what you may not know is that farm work is increasingly about precision agriculture. Whether you're a greenhouse worker that needs to be able to interact with different sensors, whether you are troubleshooting a John Deere tractor or combine harvester that has computer equipment installed to monitor irrigation techniques, increasingly agricultural work requires digital skills. We're here in a hotel for a conference, an event. There are AV folks running tech behind the scenes. Working in the hospitality industry now requires tech skills. We had an engineer on stage earlier at the panel with El Paso, right? A mechanical engineer, but software engineers are crucially important in making sure that we could hear from Congresswoman Escobar earlier, right? Make sure that we had that connection live from El Paso. So I say this just to ground this discussion we're about to have in the people, the Latino workers, Latino communities, who are part of making that discussion happen and who need to be part of the ongoing investments that the Deputy Assistant Secretary was just sharing with us as the Digital Equity Act and other investments through the infrastructure law roll out. So as you hear from our illustrious panelists, I want you to keep in mind those people and how they interact with this world of digital skills and technology that we're going to be talking about. We have a truly terrific panel with us today. I could spend a long time reading their bios to you, but I promise you can find them in the event program. We have joining me, and closest to me, rather, is Juan Otero of Comcast. You'll be hearing from him about their groundbreaking work around digital skills. Next to Juan is Amanda Renteria of Code for America, another person who really needs no introduction. The work of Code for America is well known, and you'll hear even more about it in today's panel. Next to her is Priscilla Delgado Argeris from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and you'll be hearing from Priscilla about some of the FCC's initiatives underway on digital equity. And then joining us remotely, and we appreciate your commitment to public health, is Hector Mujica of google.org. And Hector, we're so appreciative that you're able to join us virtually today, and we're appreciative of the folks with digital skills who made that happen. So again, got to connect this to the real people, otherwise, you know, this discussion happens in the abstract. And I want you all to not only leave this room with a really keen appreciation of how this affects real people's lives, but I want you to be thinking about everything we're going to hear from these incredibly brilliant panelists with that lens. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Priscilla to share a little bit about the FCC's work.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm from the Federal Communications Commission. I am Chief Legal Advisor to Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, and I just wanted to mention a few things that the FCC is working on. Probably top of mind is the Affordable Connectivity Program, which you may or may not be familiar with, but out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was money set aside to help with broadband affordability specifically. The FCC has programs that have supported this before, but not on this level or scale. So it's $30 a month towards your broadband bill, more if you're on tribal lands, and an additional $100 towards devices. We are doing everything we can to work on outreach for this program to make sure that people in all communities are aware of it, that they're making use of it. It is an income eligible program, so one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with our other federal partners. For example, some emails that just went out to Pell Grant recipients. I think April was just mentioning the importance of Pell Grants to Latino communities and community colleges that sort of make your enrollment much faster. If you get that email, you know you're eligible, and we're working with agencies to create these matching data agreements so that people can enroll much more quickly, because we know that that can be a big burden to getting into these programs when you have to sign on and provide a bunch of information and documents. Rather, if you're already in a program, you can then add this program to you and help, you know, take some of that, save some money at home, and still get that access to broadband and devices. So we are working really hard on that, working across the government to push that out. In addition, we have something that's maybe not as obvious, but we are spending a lot of time and energy on our broadband maps. We have the Broadband Data Act requires us to do much more granular maps than we've ever done before, and this will be a location by location map of the United States. So every household that could be reached by mass market residential broadband will be on this map, and providers have to say like location by location if they reach that place. And so that our very first map, we're calling it our first draft because this is a new process that's much more technical than anything we've done before, is supposed to go public around mid-November, so you can take a look. There will be a challenge process if the public disagrees with some of what they see. There will also be a data collection every 6 months to keep that information up to date. And it's really exciting for the agency. It's also really exciting what the public, what nonprofits, and what other people might be able to do with that information, and the policies that we can create and how we can target and really understand what's going on with access in different communities. And then the last thing I'll just mention, and this is not an area that I specifically have been working on, but I know the agency is hard at work. Part of the infrastructure law requires the FCC to undertake a digital discrimination proceeding to ensure that there is no discrimination in access based on race, religion, et cetera, in the law. So we have launched that proceeding. We've assembled a task force that's working on these issues, and we're also working with a federal advisory committee representing a lot of different people that is expected to give us a report soon. So we're working on that. So just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you, Priscilla. And unless you're a map geek like me, perhaps maps don't sound that sexy, but I want to emphasize something really important that Priscilla just said. The maps that the FCC is working on now to show which neighborhoods and communities have broadband access are going to be the roadmap for billions of dollars in new spending. So make sure your community is at the table in looking at and challenging and putting input into those maps to make sure that they are fully accurate. That is incredibly, incredibly important. Okay, so we have a few minutes here. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to provide some short and sweet remarks, and then we're going to come to your questions. So you should have a note card at your table. I'm going to encourage you now to be jotting down questions as they may occur to you, and we'll be collecting those note cards. I'm actually not going to ask any of my moderator questions that I had planned because I want to keep this panel on track time-wise, and I think it's more important that we get to your questions in the audience. So let me turn now to Juan and ask him to talk a little bit about his work at Comcast.
Thank you, and let me start off by thanking Aspen and my friend Dominica, who I can't see because these lights are right here, for the opportunity, this great day that we've had, and the micro-targeting of the issues of digital equity. One of the benefits of being as old as I am, I have been working on this issue for some time, and working for a company that's been pretty dedicated to this cause, whether it's Internet Essentials 10 years ago to our Project Up, a $1 billion commitment. It's been a journey, and I've seen that from our friends in the federal government, how we're approaching the issues from third parties, how we're thinking about this, to the issues of, no, I don't think maps are geeky. I think we need to have that data approach to figure out so we don't put good inputs into bad outcomes. In a nutshell, the whole focus on this word equity, I mean, again, this is about looking at outcomes. And we're trying to do our part, moving beyond the concept of adoption and connection to entrepreneurship, a theme that I've heard throughout this day about creativity, a theme that I've heard throughout this day. Skills, not just the immediate skills that folks think people need, but that growth mindset that's going to allow for that creation of wealth that we've heard. So again, I'm proud to work for a company that has committed to this issue, working with our federal partners. I want to commend the FCC for their numbers on ACP. I don't think they get the credit they deserve in terms of the connections that they've done thus far. This is not easy work, but you've got a private sector, and we need groups like Aspen to be all in to actually try and close this adoption and digital divide. This issue has lingered on entirely too long, and I'm entirely too old. I don't want to keep talking about it. I want to see solutions. So with that, I will pass to my friend.
Yeah, great. Well, I also just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for being in this work for so long. Code for America just started about 12 years ago now, and we are a tech nonprofit. We believe, and really we're founded on this idea, that the two biggest levers to change people's lives at scale are technology and government. Our mission is actually to work with government at all levels to make sure they are actually delivering services to communities who have been left out. Programs like Social Security, Medicaid, heating assistance, housing assistance, food assistance, student loans, and now broadband. And our whole idea is, even if you did nothing to change policy right now, there are $60 billion in unclaimed benefits every year. And when you actually dive into those numbers, who aren't getting those resources, time and time again, you go through program by program, and the data is out there, and what you will see is brown, black, indigenous communities are being left out. Now, what does this practically mean for an organization like Code for America, and how can we help? Well, the work that you probably are most familiar with or have heard about is child tax credit. When that policy was actually passed, we actually started to look in and say, okay, how are you going to actually make sure it reaches all communities? And there's like, well, there's a form on the IRS site. That's great, right? Like, how easy is that?
Really helpful.
And so what we did was we started to actually run a couple people through who had never filed taxes before and said, fill out that form. It was about 275 we did as a pilot. Nobody made it through except for one person, and it was wrong. And so we went to work with the White House and Treasury, and we said, listen, how do we make sure we have our revenue protocols, our behind the scenes, so that people can actually make it through? And then we iterated over and over and over again, got better, not just in English, but English and Spanish. And what we learned from that process is, now 2 years fast forward, we now have $550 million distributed through that process. In addition, what we learned, and this is particularly important for this community, is our Puerto Riqueño brothers and sisters, it was harder to get them because of some of the back-end regulatory measures. So just this year, we actually launched CTC in Puerto Rico, and in fact, right now, I think Governor Pierluisi and Gene Sperling are actually trying to do a press awareness campaign on the island so people will sign up. Now, I mention all of that because that's just one body of work, right? There's also safety net. There's also, like I said, student loans. And so just to put it all together, the reason why this matters and why you all are hearing on all these numbers swirling around is when you think about 1 in 4 new businesses are Hispanic owned, when you think about 1 in 5 students right now in post-secondary education are Latino Hispanic, and when you think about the fact that we will soon be 30% of all students in public education, if we cannot figure out digital delivery right now, we are not just going to leave behind the Latino community, but we're going to leave behind the potential of this country. And so it is top of mind that this kind of conversation is truly relevant, not just for ourselves, but for the broader scope of what this country can do. And so it's with that spirit that I'm excited to be a part of not only this conversation, but the task force that we started. And I just want to share a little bit about that. We had a pretty big conversation where we invited a lot of really great voices, leaders in nonprofits, business, elected officials' office to come together, and really we had 3 different conversations, or 3 main aspects surfaced. Number 1, we brainstormed the biggest hurdles to Latino digital success. The second thing is we went around and talked about different proven approaches to support digital access. And then the third conversation was really about moving into action and seizing this momentum on digital access and inclusion. And so we will be getting together in January to really come together to brainstorm and workshop what are the key principles to Latino digital success. And so a lot of the conversations that are happening here will also inform what we come up with. So I'm just really excited to be part of this group and this conversation, and I too want to make sure that we get to digital access and equity much faster than what you have spent getting us to here.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Hector in just a minute, but a reminder, if you haven't already written a question on a card, please go ahead and do that. We are collecting cards now, and I do want to get to as many questions from you all as we can. I'm going to turn things over now to Hector Mujica of google.org. Hector?
Thank you so much. First of all, so sorry that I couldn't join you all in person. I'm coming your way with tremendous gratitude for making the space for this conversation. I myself am Venezuelan American and have spent over a decade in the tech sector. So this, of course, is a topic that is near and dear to me personally. Now, we at Google really believe that technology has the power to unlock new opportunities for growth. Yet we also acknowledge that opportunities are not equitably distributed. Technological advancements are really changing the way and the requirements that we work and the requirements for our workforce, which is why we've been looking to really leverage this moment as an opportunity to build a digital economy that is within reach to every American. Now, when we try to then segment and look at that specifically for the Latino community, I think there's a few glaring realities that we have to acknowledge. Over 80% of middle-class jobs in the US will require a strong knowledge of digital skills over the next 10 years. And we also know that 18% of the overall US labor workforce is made up of Latinos. Yet over half of Latinos ages 16 to 64 have no to limited digital skills. That is a very clear forecast that without digital skills, Latinos will be overrepresented in the groups that are excluded from economic mobility and opportunity in an increasingly digital economy. Which is why we at Google.org on the jobs side, we've been really focusing on supporting and working alongside some of the best-in-class nonprofit organizations like the Hispanic Federation, Unidos, LULAC, to bring digital skilling and job placement solutions to the community, including solutions like the Google Career Certificates, employer-backed credentials that provide an alternate pathway to digital economy, upward mobility-oriented, high-growth jobs in the economy. And we're not just providing digital skills alone, because we also acknowledge that these are communities and populations that have multiple barriers to learning and to employment, which is why we leverage our philanthropy at Google.org to enable our grantees, these organizations, to not provide skills in isolation, but also to provide what we call wraparound support, to really make sure that they're removing those barriers, those impediments through living stipends, to make sure that people can actually have the luxury to learn, because time to learn is a luxury. People have so many obligations, so many responsibilities, and having time to just go and learn and upskill and reskill is a luxury in and of itself. Providing people with connectivity support. Priscilla, to your point, so many people are disconnected, and being able to upskill and reskill is not an option for them. So being able to provide them with connectivity solutions, social emotional support, work readiness skills, basic life skill training. We've been able to deploy some grant resources to organizations like the National Digital Navigator Corps, NDIA, to really focus on expanding to 18 rural and tribal communities across the U.S., and with what we call digital navigators, right? And that is going to be able to empower these communities to receive one-on-one tech training and community outreach to connect people to the internet, and therefore connect people to these digital skills. The last component that I'll quickly mention is on the small and medium-sized business side of the house. Again, something that's deeply near and personal to me, coming from a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs. We've been playing a role in supporting nonprofit organizations that are working hard to help small business owners take full advantage of the promise of the digital economy, fully understand how to most maximize the internet and digital platforms to expand, grow, and sustain their small business, and also to ensure that they have equitable access to capital. We know that many minority-led small businesses, many Black and Brown-led small businesses lack the historical access to capital that enable these small businesses to grow and thrive, which is why we've been working alongside of organizations like Hispanics and Philanthropy and others to be able to deploy capital across key Latino markets in the U.S. On a quick comment on the Latino Digital Success Task Force, to Amanda's point, we are just so excited to have this opportunity, to have this be a kind of a two-way medium to both understand what's important to you all that we should be paying attention to. This is a really critical, really pivotal moment in time. There are many federal initiatives that are going to be addressing digital inclusion, like Priscilla was mentioning, right? Digital equity programs, broadband equity access deployment programs that are going to be putting dollars in the hands of states and cities. And right now is the time to plan. Right now is the time to strategize. And right now is the time to ensure that we are equipping these communities to make sure that they maximize these resources and that our community, the Latino community, can equitably play in this sandbox, which is why as a task force, we're going to continue to play a role to serve as a brain trust, to raise awareness, visibility around the urgency of providing tools for Latino workers, small business owners, students, entrepreneurs, so that they too can thrive in the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hector. So we've heard from private industry, we've heard from public-private partnerships, we've heard from government, and you all have spoken, and I have to eat my words. There are more than a few map geeks in this room. Thank you all for your detailed questions. I'm going to get 3 questions out on the table quickly, and in the last few minutes of this panel, I'm going to give our panelists a chance to respond to them. The question for Priscilla is about maps. 3 people are very eager to provide feedback and critique to the FCC. So if you could sort of elaborate for folks what the process will look like,
Sure.
that would be terrific. And then the 2 other questions I wanted to get out on the table, one really around why it seems as though the digital equity conversation is sometimes happening in a separate sphere from the racial equity conversation, and how we might better integrate those conversations. And then the second around digital skills, and Hector started to touch on this with the Google Career Certificates mention, and Juan touched on it with some of Comcast's investments in digital skill building, but several questions from you all in the audience about how do we make sure that it isn't just about handing people a device and broadband access, but really helping them build the skills they need. So Priscilla, I'm going to come to you first to talk maps. How can folks weigh in?
Sure. So our map is expected to be published mid-November. When there's an actual map, there's 2 ways to challenge. One is a bulk challenge. So this would be for state governments, local governments. It could be for organizations if you have actual evidence to contradict the availability that's in the map. But another way you can work with communities is to get people to file their individual challenges, and that is a matter of just clicking on the map, explaining, for example, I asked this provider for service and they said they don't come to my neighborhood, and you fill out that form and you can file the challenge that way. For a local government, they might have a franchise agreement or something that shows that it's not possible for that provider to be in that location. So those are the ways that you would challenge availability. We do need sort of specific evidence. For the mobile challenges, there's a specific speed test that you can download from the FCC to challenge on the mobile side.
So they're going to fcc.gov.
Yes, and we
Okay.
have a mapping page that has all these resources, and I'll probably just stop there. But the challenge process kicks off like a response period. It goes on, but we are going to be constantly updating this map. So as the challenges are resolved, and new data will be submitted by the providers every 6 months.
Right.
So.
I'm going to go quickly, Amanda, Juan, and then if Hector wants to chime in the last few minutes of the panel here on the question either on racial equity or digital skills.
So one of the things I think we consistently bump up against is this idea that you are what you measure. And we don't have nearly enough measurements right now to understand racial gaps and demographics when we come to programs that we're trying to institute. And so partly, I think this conversation of digital equity is we kind of know it's there. Like, we're going to have gaps. What's really important and what can drive truly good outcomes is that you actually have the basis for understanding what does the data look like, who are you leaving out. And for the most part, it's either county by county or city by city or state by state. So one of the things I hope is we saw this administration put out there an executive order for equitable outcomes. And now the next phase to that is, now how are you proving that you are actually closing that equity gap?
Juan?
Without question, the digital equity is part of the larger equity conversation. I think you cannot look at this data, you cannot disaggregate it without seeing the racial overtones. It is what it is. So with that lens, it's almost an impossibility for me to see how this is separate. And since it's such a cornerstone for wealth creation, everything that comes with mobility, how can we disaggregate that? So no, I think these are joined at the hip. I think, to Amanda's point, I think it's fascinating that we actually can have data, that we can in so much better ways, if we are thoughtful about this, measure outcomes, inputs, measure how folks are progressing over the years, wealth creation, et cetera. I think it tells a very powerful narrative. But again, the key is that we have to be very thoughtful in how we do this.
Great.
Can I just also, to link back to the maps, this is why the data needs to be right in the maps, because then you can go back and say, this is missing. But if government can't even see you, right, and because of the way the systems have worked in the past, this is our moment to actually look in and say, wait a second, that's my neighborhood, or that's where I grew up, and I know that we're missing something there. So there's a little bit of responsibility on all of us in this room to sort of say, where do you come from, where are our communities, and make sure that they are seen at this moment, because that's at the very beginning stages.
But it's also incumbent upon people in this room to not let this moment pass. We talked about the $1 billion and how that is funded for this year. You know, the undiscovered country, the future, if you will, is going to be determined by the people in this room on whether we're going to continue to beat that drum, or we're just going to take our moment and eventually have bad maps, because folks are going to change. It's just not going to be a priority.
Last 30 seconds. Hector, if you'd like to chime in on either the skills or the racial equity part of the conversation, please do.
You know, happy to. You know, I would echo Juan, Amanda, I would echo what you both shared. If I can share kind of a quick anecdote and perspective on that. I think 2 points. One, Juan, to your point earlier, we've been trying the same thing over and over again, and we're getting the same results. I do think there's a unique positioning for philanthropy to serve as risk capital, to be able to empower us to innovate, try new solutions, try new ideas, test them in a way that we can take risk in ways that government and private capital can't. And also acknowledge that philanthropy is not the solution in and of itself. It's really going to require a lot of other actors that are going to be needing to participate in this, unlocking additional private capital, unlocking additional public sector capital is incredibly important. One thing that's been near and dear to my heart and in the heart of Google.org recently is how do we also innovate in unlocking the over $3 trillion that currently sits in the balance sheet, the corporate balance sheet of Fortune 500 companies in the US alone, to be able to flex a little bit of that money to lean into some of these social impact imperatives, whether it be racial equity, whether it be greater access to digital inclusion, what have you. We were experimenting with that at Google.org. We have a $100 million fund right now that we've deployed, half philanthropic capital, half return-seeking capital from the Google Treasury, and we hope that this will encourage other corporates to also follow suit and unlock some of that money.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you, all of you, to join me in thanking our amazing panel and thanking Dominica and the team at Aspen for convening the task force and for having this really important conversation. As you can see, we could have talked much longer, and I hope you'll come find us all at the reception in an hour and chat more about these really important issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you.